calling us to order at 6:12. And let's do our roll call. Terry Andrews.
Here.
Ira Brashovsky. Gwen McMullins. Betsy Kahn, I'm here. Armando
Present.
is here. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to rush right into item 4. I think everybody who has signed up knows the drill about the timer. But I'll tell the rest of you. I have 3 minutes timed on my timer on my phone. There's a kitchen timer on the podium for you to be able to time yourself so that you aren't surprised when your time is up. So we're at item number 4. Renee, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. First off, I can't tell if the mic is on, but if it isn't, please let me know. First off, I assume you're not adopting the agenda, which I find surprising. But along those lines, I believe the public had 27 hours notice, which makes it pretty remarkable that this room is as full as it is. I believe it's an amazing disservice to members of the public and the community to do special meetings with the absolute minimum notice required. It's far better than the special meeting that was held on August 17th of last year, illegally. And as a result, I am just reminding the 2 sitting board members who were apparently present at that would be you, Mr. Zambrano, and you, Mr. Brashovsky, that meeting was not only illegal, but the way it was set up was such that you 2 gentlemen and the other members of the board who were in attendance could face criminal charges, jail time, and financial penalties for that action of trying to keep the public in the dark. At the same time, because you 2 gentlemen are both here, I would remind you of my continuing demand that you both resign, because your illegal actions are a stain on this board and continue to be the basis of public derision and public conflict regarding our treasured local public library system. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Ryan, maybe now could you speak to the adoption of the agenda question?
Yeah. Hello. My green light is on. Hello. Hello. Your green light is on
Talk
too.
really loud.
I'm going to talk really loud. So the adoption of the agenda, my understanding was that for a special meeting, you are not allowed to reorder or change agenda items. That's my understanding of how it works, and that the item was not appropriate for that. We will certainly check into that matter and see if that's accurate. But the feedback that I have gotten, and I'd have to check where my sources are from, but the feedback that I was given was that it was not permissible in a special meeting to reorganize or delete agenda items, so that was not appropriate to be on the agenda. And again, if there's differing opinions, then I'll certainly.
Oh, wow. I'll check on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Grunemeyer. Would you like to use the timer, sir?
Pardon?
Would you like to use the timer there?
The timer.
The timer, if you would
Yes, I
like.
will.
All right. Thank you.
So I find it remarkable, Dale Grunemeyer, attorney for Mindy Today. I find it remarkable that the board doesn't have to adopt the agenda, and because of that, we're being denied an opportunity to comment on the agenda. The remarks I was going to make about the agenda is to congratulate the board on having given at least the minimum and maybe 3 hours more of the legally required notice, and to comment that that is an improvement over the August 17, 2017 meeting, where two members of this board participated in the meeting, as Mr. Amy indicated in his prior remarks, in a meeting that was held at the Loma Alta Park that Ms. McMullins did not attend because it was her birthday on August 17, 2017. Thank God she didn't, because then she'd have been participating in an illegal meeting. And that meeting was not posted at the library. It was posted at the Bob Lucas Center after Bob Lucas Center had closed, and it was not posted online. And if you go to the library's website and look at the agendas, you'll find agendas, minutes, for every meeting that this board has had over the last years, except for August 17. And lo and behold, there is nothing on the agenda that refers to August 17. We didn't learn about that until on August 15 this year, 2 days short of 1 year later. The library produced in the public record that I've disseminated to the board and have disseminated to you all, is the first time the public has known about that meeting, which was held not at the library, but at the Loma Alta Center, in a deliberate and conscious attempt to avoid public input. And what happened at that meeting, because again there are documents which reflected, even though it was a closed session, what happened at that meeting is that Chair McDonald presented to the meeting, and I'm sure Mr. Brashatsky and Mr. Zambrano remember this well, presented his false charges that Mindy Katay had engaged in financial irregularities by giving herself and other employees a raise, when in fact that raise had been approved by the board. In fact, everything she did was consistent with the policies of the board. And this document demonstrates the fact that it was an illegal meeting, that there was a deliberate intention to avoid public scrutiny of it. And in the document I disseminated to you last week, our last meeting, which didn't have the supporting documentation that is here, this is number 10 on the 96 violations of the Brown Act over less than a year's period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Victor. You can do the official timekeeper.
Oh,
Whoever sits there.
now I get it.
So I no one sat there, Victoria. You were wondering.
Oh, I think the right person has arrived.
Haha.
Mary.
Are you here?
Yeah, she is.
Hello, I'm Mary Landau, and a longtime resident of Altadena, and this library is very important to me. And I was wondering if it's at all possible to have the director come back, since we're losing our interim director, because we're paying her anyway, and the two new board members have never seen
she had made some mistakes. I thought we addressed those items in her contract. Is she in this for the money? You ask. She deserves to pay. She has earned it. I keep asking myself, are you being respectful to me? Is there a hidden agenda that I am not aware of? What is really going on? I say let's pay her and move on. Ms. McMullen, those were your words to Mr. Brzezinski in private a year ago. And you asked Mr. Brzezinski, are you being respectful to Mindy? I assume that was a rhetorical question because we all know that Mr. Brzezinski was being anything but respectful to Mindy, and neither were Mr. Zambrano and Mr. McDonald. You asked Mr. Brzezinski, was there a hidden agenda? 11 months later, Ms. McMullen, what do you think about that agenda now? Is an agenda hidden behind dozens of Brown Act violations? That's the hidden agenda. You asked Mr. Brzezinski what's really going on. What do you think is really going on, Ms. McMullen? After you told Mindy in August of last year, and these are your own words, I had an opportunity to speak with Mindy today. This is an August 17th, 2017 email. She is very concerned about the email that she received from Ira. I assured her that she needed to relax and that she would get the 3 years contract. That's what you told her in August of 2017. And then you found out 2 months later there was a hidden agenda. And now you know what that hidden agenda was. It was to harass her and to intimidate her and to not coming back to be the director of this library. And now you have a rudderless ship. You don't have a director, but you have somebody who's done an incredible job here for the last 3 years, and you can't publicly acknowledge that and call these 2 men to task for what they've done to her. It's time for you to do the right thing. It's never too late to do the right thing. So I'm begging you here in front of all these people, take what you said privately in October in 2017 and think about it in September of 2018 and tell me whether or not you should publicly stand up for Ms. Katay, like all these other people in the room are doing. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Those were all the requests I had for comment. Under item 4, public communication, is there anyone else who has a last minute request? Okay. We're going to move on to number 5, our new business item A, designation of acting district director. And to begin the public comment on that, I'm going to call on Monica Hubbard.
I haven't started you yet. Until you take that mic. I'll give you 1 minute.
You say ready, set, go.
So, Ms. Khan and members of the Board of Trustees, as you grapple with demanding issues on many fronts, you are now faced with needing to find another interim library director. Ideally, you are seeking someone who can be not only a placeholder, but someone who can help keep the library moving forward in service to our diverse community. The library needs someone with the ability to lead staff as they continue the process of developing annual and long-term goals, and who can perform the slow and considered work necessary to bring together the board, the staff, and community partners, building on work that has already been started long ago with the community's, LA County's community visioning process and our library's community conversations initiative. There is much challenging this board and this staff right now. The library is facing lawsuits, bylaws that are outdated, and a strategic plan that will expire at the year's end. And while recent improvements make the library more attractive, the considerable underlying physical plant problems remain unaddressed. There are many different and passionate viewpoints on how the board should address these issues, but one thing is very clear. This community cares deeply about the library. Neighbors Building a Better Altadena urges you to bring in an experienced, proven library leader as an interim director who knows our library, knows our community, knows where libraries of the 21st century need to go, and also knows how to care for, mentor, and inspire a staff to be their best selves. That leader is Jan Sanders. By appointing Ms. Sanders to serve as acting interim director while you set the library's way forward through the legal, governance, and oversight issues before you, you will have the time to focus on your responsibilities as trustees to set the library's course and determine the best permanent leader to follow that course. You can be confident that library management and operations are being led by an exceptionally skilled and experienced public library leader, a leader who will be able to steady the ship, if you will, and help begin the detailed planning process critical to charting the library's course for the next 5 years. Leadership transitions are often difficult, even in the best of circumstances. And right now, continued leadership uncertainty does not provide for the best of circumstances. This library needs a very capable interim director to follow Ryan Roy. That person is Jan Sanders. We urge you to make the motion tonight pending the necessary contract negotiations to hire Ms. Sanders as the acting interim director for our Altadena libraries. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Bridget.
I didn't come here intending to speak, but I do want to commend Monica for her, I think, well thought out recommendation. I liked everything she had to say about the qualifications. However, I would like to urge you to consider bringing the current director, who's now in lead, back to serve the library. I know it has to cause all kinds of legal issues, all of which could have been prevented earlier than we stand here now. I would feel that I'm betraying this community if I didn't at least stand up and say we do have a librarian who, as far as I know, is on contract at the end of the month. I would encourage you to bury the hatchet and consider having her come back to serve this library community. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Renee.
Yes, thank you. Following up on Monica's comments, the only problem with bringing in someone who's actually experienced, knowledgeable, and knows all about the laws is that not all members of this board, but the current majority of this board has shown absolute disdain for that sort of individual. That's the current library director. Now your choices are either someone that the current majority of this board won't respect or listen to, or someone without the qualifications necessary to act as acting director. Now, I've previously spoken about the legal bills and the amount of money you all have decided, our money, you have decided to spend, $60,000 as of the end of June. That doesn't include July. You're pushing already the annual contract fee for a district librarian in this little district. You've been paying the existing director to stay away. You've ordered her to not enter the workplace. She knows everything this library needs. She knows all the issues. She knows everything about it. And yet, you're going to probably tonight take action in open session, which is an interesting concept to discuss personnel issues in open session. But you're going to take action to likely appoint someone who is not qualified. And then what are you going to do when the contract with Mindy ends on September 28th, 1 week after Ryan leaves. Thank you, by the way, Ryan, again, for all your wonderful service to this district. I haven't said that, and I apologize. You're the guy, the only picture I can find of you is wearing the virtual reality goggles, and most times you're hiding, back in the back office, and most people don't see you, but you've had a terrific impact in situations that no rational person would want to function, and you've done this library a great service in this community. But I'm concerned about what action, if any, this board can take other than the only one that makes any sense, which is to bring back the library director you're currently paying. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Mr. Grunmeyer.
I also want to commend Ryan Roy. Some time ago, I supported his getting combat pay. I think he's earned that combat pay, and I think he's done a remarkable job. And I speak on behalf of both myself and Mindy, that he's threaded the needle between serving this board with all of its dysfunction while still maintaining its integrity. It is remarkable that tonight you have the opportunity, in considering whether to bring Mindy Katay back, as several speakers has urged, that you have the opportunity for the first time to publicly address the issue of why you're not bringing her back. We have told you that we're not asserting any privacy rights. You're free to talk about it. If you've got something that justifies not bringing her about, tell these people. Tell them. Because the investigation that's going on is not an investigation against Mindy Katay. It is an investigation of her charges. She's on administrative leave anonymously because she raised a complaint where ordinarily, a complaint of harassment, ordinarily the harassment victim stays in the workplace, and the harasser, Mr. Brashatsky, Mr. Zambrano, they are put on administrative leave, not the person alleging harassment. So you can talk about that tonight. The dialogue of this board, ever since I've been coming to it, has been a dialogue that completely ignores two elephants in the room. One elephant is why you're keeping Mindy Katay out of the workplace, why the commitment that Gwen McMullins made a year ago, that Mindy doesn't have to worry about getting the three-year extension, why that's not being honored. You can talk about that tonight. You never have at this point. The other elephant in the room is the 96 Brown Act violations that we've documented in a 50-page document that paragraph by paragraph presents those, and which has about 300 pages of backup documentation. Why don't you talk about that? Because keeping Mindy Katay and not bringing her back is inextricably tied by what's happened in the Brown Act violations that are massive, pervasive, and a reflection of an illegal governance of this body. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Okay. So we have some time to discuss item 5A. Ryan, maybe I'll ask you to just report on kind of the immediate needs that we have until you leave, and possibly slightly thereafter, depending on what happens next year. I don't know if you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
Sorry.
In case you missed it, I'm not going to be here myself. accepted a job offer at another library. So on September 21st, that will be my last day here with the Altadena Library District. I submitted a resignation letter to the board, I think it was last Tuesday, which immediately brought up the conversation of transition of leadership here at the library, how we can work with the board, the library administration would work with the board to facilitate that transition. So there's a couple of options that have popped up to us that we have not discussed with the board, because that would be a Brown Act violation. So Betsy and I met to talk about what would be on the agenda, and I kind of laid out to her what our possible courses of action might be. So this will be the first time that the full board is hearing this, and then hopefully we'll have a nice robust discussion. So the options are, we have a next person in the chain of command here in the library in terms of the order of senior librarians here. The next person in that chain of command is Stella Terrazas, who's over here. Stella has been the acting public services director, which is my old position, for quite a while now. I think she started in early May. She's been doing many of my former duties as the public services director, and has really been an integral part of the administrative team here. So obviously one of the options is that Stella will take over as the acting district director. The other option that we discussed was bringing in someone who is qualified and available from out in the community to take over the position. That's going to be something that would take a lot of consideration, possibly maybe even an ad hoc committee from the board to consider who all may be available to possibly take that position or be qualified for it. And as we heard from one of the public speakers, there's already been a name proposed. And I think the task that the board would have if they went that route would be to consider all qualified candidates for that position, and then identify a single most qualified candidate to step in. So those are the two avenues that are available to us, and I believe that's what the board should be discussing for item 5A.
Wait a minute, why is
isn't
Mindy not
Mindy
even in
an option?
consideration? You're paying her.
Well,
It's a third option.
there is
The
a
only
third
option,
option
really.
that has been presented from the top, which is
You
that
can't say
the
never occurred to you, come on. Okay,
Ryan,
it may have never occurred to me.
Ryan, may.
Ryan.
Yeah.
May. Um, We're not gonna make a decision tonight. The hiring and managing and selection and all decisions about a library director are under the purview of the board. So we appreciate your input. And as Ryan alluded to, some of what has been suggested here, we have already been considering. Part of what's difficult is the time frame. As Ryan mentioned, his last day is September 21st. Today is September 5th. The possibility, and by the way, board, in a minute I'll shut up so you guys can say what you want to say, but the possibility of us being able to consider all those options and do the due diligence that we would need to do to make a good decision by September 21st. It's possible, but it's not certain. So one thing I'd just like to propose, and then I'll open it up for discussion, is that we consider Estella's generous and gracious offer to step in an interim if we need her to after Ryan's last day, But that in the meantime, we have a board committee to consider the other ideas that have been already discussed between me and Ryan and also raised here, so that we can, have a working group that can bring a recommendation back to the board. So that's something I'm proposing, and I'd love to hear what the rest of you have to think about that. Anybody? Terry?
I've got a few comments. One, thank you, Ryan, for pointing out that all the members of the board are catching up with this issue the same as the public. In fact, I think you might be ahead of the curve because we haven't been meeting about this as per the Brown Act. We're respectful of that. And I guess the question I would have, or the thought I would have, is that this needs to be a deliberative and methodical procedure, especially given all the things that are happening at the library right now. This would be the worst time of all to make a bad or controversial choice for a leader at the library. So my simple question, I think it goes to you, Ryan, would be, what kind of a bridge can we build in terms of time between the time you leave and the time we need to have someone sitting in your seat? And the other thing is, I'm looking at Stella now. Stella, I'd like, with the show of your hand perhaps, to let us know that you are interested in bridging that gap a little bit for us, that you are not being asked to do something that's uncomfortable for you or anything else. I'd like to start hearing from the people that could be in the mix for this whole thing. Now, I hate to put you on the spot, but I see you nodding your head. I mean, is that something that feels right to you?
I am very much willing to help this organization. I'm interested in bridging the gap to allow you to look for the appropriate person. So.
Thank you. And then there was a lot of discussion. In fact, we received a petition with a couple of dozen names on it. I know most of you must have that or have been a part of it, regarding Jan Sanders, who I've met, and I think she's a fabulous person with a lot of experience. Certainly she would be on my short list, but right now she's the only list I have because we haven't really looked around for anybody. And I'm not seeing her here tonight. Am I wrong about that? So I mean, we've gotten this petition, but at a time like this, it would be interesting to see if the person who is being put forward is actually interested in the job. I haven't seen that, so that would be just a comment that I have about this. My feeling about it, though, getting back to the main point, is that this needs to be a reflective, well thought out procedure to get this interim director. I just heard Betsy talk about perhaps a committee, an ad hoc committee to get together and put out a serious search with all the talent we can muster for people that might be a good fit for this position, and also people that might be willing to do it on an interim basis. Everything about what we're all going through right now is very uncertain. We're getting a lot of pressure, as you see every meeting, about things that we really can't discuss. So when you all in the room are met by silence on our part after a closed session, just a lack of commentary from us, that's a sound of us doing our jobs. This is what I believe. We're working with folks that are trying to get us through this whole process, and we don't want to do anything or say anything that could imperil the library more than it is already. The number one consideration for me, and I think I speak for all the folks on the staff and on the board, we want to do what's best for the library. That's truly in our hearts. When you see us not responding to a lot of the things that are going on in this room, it's because we don't want to add another element of uncertainty to what's going on. That's a comment that's probably overdue from us, frankly, but I want to let you know what's in my heart, and I believe that I'm speaking for the other members of the board. So please give us time to get through this, and now we've got a new challenge, and that would be to try to fill the very capable shoes of Ryan. I was very distraught when I heard about the news, but happy at the same time that he's off to a better place, perhaps. Actually, there's no.
People say when someone dies.
And there's no perhaps about it. I'm sure he's off to a better place at the moment. So, that very awkward humor, I understand that. But I'm giving you what's my feelings about this, and getting back to the almost emotion that may have been coming up from the
Not quite
floor
yet,
here.
but-
Yeah, is that, can we put this in committee, take a really close look at it and see what happens next?
Thank you, Terry.
Permission to address Jan Sanders not being here.
Sure.
She's willing to come to the, she stayed away on purpose, thinking it was more appropriate. She's happy to drive over here right now and signal her willingness.
We'll take that comment as her willingness. She doesn't need to drive over here. I hope we'll be done by the time she could get here, so. Thank you. Terry, other comments or for the good of the order, Armando?
Yeah, my comment is more on when you exit, what are the immediate tasks that need to be covered? Comes to mind payroll and other stuff like that, and do we have someone in place right away that can at least keep those processes going?
Yes, so the main immediate task that is important that we resolve is in item 5B, which is the designation of an authorized representative that will be here in the building to handle any aspects of our financial accounts that may need to be handled. This deals with our Chase banking account. And to add an authorized signer to our checking account, because we have 2 staff members that sign each check for internal control purposes. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next item, but in terms of our finances, we have a staff accountant, Nicole, who handles our day-to-day finances, and a financial consultant, our CPA, Paul Kmart, who works with 2 other CPAs that are available at the drop of a hat if we need them. There is very little that I can't train Stella on in the next couple of weeks leading up to this to prepare her for anything she may need. One of the good things about me having just taken over this acting director position in January is I'm very familiar with the transition from basically the role Stella's doing now, the public services director role, into the acting director role, and I could go back and look at all of the steps that we took to make that necessary and all of the things that I discovered along the way. Now, one thing I will say that hopefully will be reassuring to the community and to the board is that when I took over this position, I was at the disadvantage of not being able to contact my predecessor at the time to ask questions. I had to start from scratch and figure out from the bottom up how this all worked. And I can tell you that Kylin and Nicole and a lot of the other staff members in the administrative staff were extremely helpful in that regard and were able to make that happen. So not only will Stella have Kylin and Nicole and our other administrative staff to help her, I'm also just a phone call away if she needs to get in touch with me. I will certainly make myself available.
Anything from this end of the table? Any comment from anyone?
I'm just really pleased that you might be available to help, and should there be questions that would be needing some assistance in. And I appreciate Stella wanting to help the library. She's been here for a number of years, and the promotion from within, I think, is the way to go at this point. There are a lot of uncertainties about a lot of situations.
So, if I may, help me craft a motion. Maybe 2. Maybe what we need to do first is that I need a motion that we I'm trying to figure out how to say it, hold on. That Stella Terrasas be named acting director as of, as we've discussed, I think, Ryan, September 24th is the first
We'll call it the
work day.
22nd.
22nd. Until such, if we need her, until such time as a longer-term interim director has been hired. Does that sound fair? Does that sound? Okay. Does anybody want to move that, what I just said?
I'll move it.
Ira moves that? Okay, somebody second?
I'll second
Terry
that.
will second. Okay, any more discussion about that idea?
Could you just say it one more time so I can, I get it.
I move that Estella Terrazas be appointed acting director, should we need her, as of September 22nd, 2018, until such time as a longer-term interim director can be hired. Is that what I said?
Yes.
Why interim? Why can't she
So,
just be until Mindy comes
So
back?
I'm gonna ask you not to speak from the audience, thanks. So, so that's been moved by Ira, seconded by Terry. No more discussion. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Well, I have a discussion
Oh,
point, sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Alan.
Just as to the language of,
Could you talk into the mic?
sorry, just as to the language as to the longer term, like what is the stopping point so that we know when another starting point is at?
Well, that's kind of the point, is that with the next motion I'm gonna propose is the formation of a committee to explore that. And so that's gonna be tough to know exactly how long that's gonna take, but we're gonna ask you to trust that we'll do it as fast, that the committee will do it as fast as it can. I'm not sure, we'll have to discuss when we get to that point whether we wanna put a time frame on that part of the decision, but I feel like we need to kind of cover our bases until we know what's gonna happen. Did you have a comment?
You know, just in terms of the language of the motion, it might be that Stella will take this position until a replacement director, whether interim or full-time, can be found, is found and put in place. So it kind of covers everything then. It gives you a little breathing room on the interim and the permanent part of
We
things.
need to allow for
Yeah.
not knowing what's gonna happen. So,
Ira made the motion, so if he wants to amend his motion, then he
No,
has
I'll
to say
amend
so.
to what Terry said.
okay. So, moved and seconded, any more discussion? Okay, now if you, all in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye, no one opposed, okay, thank you. Thank you, Estella, we don't know how much we appreciate that. Okay, so then I guess I would also like to propose, and I'll put it in a motion in a minute, that the board, I think I have the power to appoint a subcommittee, or appoint a committee, I'm pretty sure I do.
I think it's safe to move.
Yeah, I'm
creation,
definitely gonna
And
move.
then you would ask if you, I mean, you can say you're gonna do this, but usually the president will ask specific board members if they're willing to serve on that
Okay,
committee.
before or
But yeah,
after the motion, sorry for being dense.
I think after you,
Okay,
they create
got
the
it.
committee and then appoint the
Got
members.
it, okay. So I would like to propose a motion that the board appoint a committee to explore to search for a long-term interim director.
I think, you know, it seems like best if you just use a committee to recommend the hire of a new director and just kind of leave it at that. And then it seems that then that whether we designated that person to be an interim or permanent, we could do that at the time of hire.
How about this? How about, I'm sorry I didn't think this thoroughly through before I opened my mouth here at the mic. That we that we appoint a committee to fill the position of director, should we need to. How about that? And that committee bring back the recommendation to the board. Is that coherent written down? Kylan,
Make it so when I just.
I'm gonna ask you to maybe read it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ad hoc subcommittee,
Mhm.
so I am putting that in there, to fill the position of director if needed, and to bring that recommendation back to the board.
Okay. So, discussion of that. I guess we'll move and second it and then talk about the committee composition. Okay, Ira's gonna move that. And Gwen will second. Okay, so, I would like to propose that Terry be on this committee, and I would like to propose that I be on this committee. I don't know. Two, I think two is good.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, no,
That's
that's
what we
fine.
meant. Okay. So, we have a motion to form this committee, and that Terry and I will be that committee and bring back our recommendations to you with all due haste, but also all due deliberation. So, before we vote on that motion, any more discussion?
The only discussion I guess I would have would be, is there any kind of a deadline on our first report back, or, I mean, do we want to do this at the next meeting? Have a progress report?
Well, how about this? I will not be at the next meeting.
Okay,
So I think that you, as the other committee member, could certainly be prepared
Okay.
at a minimum to report back to the board on the progress of this effort
okay,
at
perfect.
that meeting.
Yep,
So
and
that
I'll be
would-
ready to do that then.
That would be on September 24th. Okay, are we ready to vote? Kylan, would you read it back one more time, please?
So motion to create an ad hoc subcommittee to fill the position of district director if needed, and to bring the recommendation back to the board of trustees.
Okay.
Can you read that in the
Uh,
microphone, please?
Sure.
Okay, there we go. So, motion to create an ad hoc subcommittee to fill the position of the district director if needed, and to bring that recommendation back to the board.
Does that require that, does that require that you,
No, we can't hear you.
I'm trying to be sure I say.
I'll repeat the
Speaking to
question.
your mics.
I'll repeat the question.
I'm just wondering, does it require that you put this out there, that you're looking for others to participate, or is that one of the criteria that we're gonna be doing? Or is it, we're just taking names and looking at resumes, or well, I think you would probably form that kind of decision, is that true?
I'm not sure of your question. You're wondering whether we're gonna
Take other
request.
Yeah.
Yes, we will be taking, yes, it's an open process at this point. Okay? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
aye.
Thank you. All right. We are gonna move on to 5B, which is a resolution designating an additional signer for fiscal documents and update to the authorized representatives. That's to do with our bank accounts that Ryan mentioned earlier. Couple of opportunities for comment. Renee, you wanna go first?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I mentioned, or asked to speak on this because of the fiscal ramifications. And that is, as we all know, end of September is the Taste of Dina. the Library Foundation's big fundraiser event, and it's a great opportunity for the community to come out and show how supportive it is of this wonderful organization. I would say, pay no attention to the board and their inability to address and deal with the issues facing our library. Please, I've got my ticket. I urge everyone to please buy at least one, give one to a friend, whatever you can, because this library needs community support, even if this board can't figure its way out of a paper bag and address the pertinent issues in front of it. So whatever games they play up here tonight, please, please, please buy your tickets now, show your support. It's $50 a pop. It's not that much, and it makes a huge difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I'd appreciate
No clapping.
no clapping.
Not allowed. Not in here.
So let me just tell you, we kind of decided, or maybe I did, at our last meeting that when we're clapping for appreciation of employees, we're all for it, but clapping for opinions at the mic, not so much. Mr. Dormeyer, you're up.
So I join Renee in recommending that everybody buy tickets to Taste of Dina. I bought mine too, and I hope you all will too, and support the library. It may seem contrived for me to talk about the signatory on the library's account, and I'll confess it is contrived, but the connection that I can make logically to what I want to say is that the signatory ought to be Mindy Katay. But what I really want to use that to talk about is the shamefulness of what this board just did. It is shameful. D-E-L-I-B-E-R-A-T-E, deliberate. Deliberate is the heart of democratic process. Deliberating reasoned discourse about why we do what we do. Excuse me, I stopped.
It's okay, I'll let you know.
I'm sure you will. Reasoned discourse about what we do, why we do, and the public's business. This is the heart of the Brown Act, which the board has consistently violated by deliberating underground because the dirty laundry couldn't be shown to the public. Deliberate means something different than what just occurred. There was no reasoned discussion of why you're doing what you're doing. In fact, apparently, Ms. Khan, you and Mr. Ryan discussed this, did discuss it with the other board members, which is the only appropriate way to deal with it. And you couldn't even think of bringing Mindy Katay back as the director, as one of the options. So, as Ms. McMullins asked last November, what's the hidden agenda here? Why, when you have no experience with Mindy Katay, why are you taking off the table Mindy Katay returning? That is simply and why are you refusing to discuss the matter? I've given you every license, Mindy's given you every license to talk about why she's being kept away from leading this library. And you can't even tell these people here who are asking why you're completely ignoring the elephant in the room. That is a failure to deliberate. What you people just did was to not talk about why you're going to do what you're going to do, but you're trying to figure out a way to avoid talking about it. That is inherently inconsistent with the democratic process that you should be supporting.
Thank you, Mr. Dormeyer.
Can I just ask you a question? Didn't you say when they do public comment, people listen, but you're not allowed to answer? Isn't that what you said at the beginning? That everybody's allowed to?
No,
make a public comment, but you can't answer.
No, that's not the, that's.
I'm gonna ask for no,
That's not-
no
that's not
discussion
fair.
on the,
Talk back and talk.
I'm asking for no discussion in the audience, Mr. Gronemeyer. Mr. Gronemeyer, I'm asking for no discussion in the audience.
Well,
It's
then-
not a time for public comment now.
Well, then why do you let her?
I'm asking her to not comment as well. And this is what I'm not, I'm sitting here thinking hard. I'm thinking really hard, because I wanna make 2 points. One, I'm gonna reiterate what I said earlier, which is the hiring, managing, firing, every aspect of what happens with a library director is under the purview of the board. That is our job. It is a personnel matter. Personnel matters are confidential, regardless of any attempt to bring it out into open discussion. We are not gonna bring it out into open discussion. It's a personnel matter that we have to deal
That's a
with
phony
privately.
excuse.
And I'm
That's a phony
sorry,
excuse.
once again,
That's a phony-
I'm
that's a
sorry,
phony
once again,
excuse.
sir, I'm gonna ask you, I am gonna ask you not to speak. I'm gonna ask you not to speak. It is not your turn.
That is.
I'm
that
gonna
is
ask
a-
you once again, or I'm gonna ask you to leave the room, sir. Or else, this is what I'm gonna do. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I have a question. Are you gonna have another special meeting before Ryan leaves to
signature.
Oh,
pass this
we
resolution?
can't even adjourn.
But you
I'm gonna
adjourned. You've
ask,
done it.
I'm gonna,
You've done it. You've done it. You did it. Meeting adjourned. Good night, everyone. Can't bring it out again. You adjourned it. Your choice.
this is so ugly.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
It's
It is. That's why we make plans and we proper prior planning to prevent piss poor performance. You guys did it.
Thank you, Ryan.
Another special meeting.
To those of you who took your free time of your precious evening to come and be with us in this room, I thank you. You have a lot of other choices of what to do with your time, and I'm sorry this is so hard. I don't know what else to say. We have procedures, we have rules that we are trying really, really hard to play by, and there's only so much we can do. So I'm sorry that that this meeting is ending this way, and I'm assured that the business that was cut off will be able to make happen the way we need it to make happen. So good night, everyone.